BAM is a communications agency that believes stories move the world. We move stories forward for technology-driven brands that challenge, change, and create entire industries. Today we have Natalie Sportelli, Lerer Hippeaus content and brand manager on the show. She has diverse communications experience in print, digital, and radio for her time with Forbes, CNBC, and the local newspaper and radio station in her hometown of Syracuse. During her time with Forbes, she served as producer, writer, and editor for the 30 Under 30 franchise. Let's dive in.
Hey everyone, welcome to Dear BAMF, the podcast that's for PR and marketing pros such as yourself. Thank you for listening. Today we have two wonderful co-hosts alongside me to answer all of your great questions. First, Marlena Medford, who does all of our wonderful content here at BAM. Hi, Marlena.
Hi, happy to be here.
Thanks for being here. We got some gnarly questions to go through. And then Natalie Sportelli from Lerer Hippeau, based in New York City, very prominent VC fund that a lot of you are familiar with. Particularly, you probably buy a lot of the products that the fund represents. Natalie, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. Ladies, we have quite a deck of questions to go through, so I'm going to just dig in. First one up. Let's go. Dear BAMF, my new client has told us on multiple occasions that messaging does not currently exist and that they are not internally aligned. While this has already created several roadblocks during our campaign, they do not understand why it isn't so important to have set messaging versus coming up with things on the fly for different channels opportunities. How do I get everyone on the same page? Natalie, why don't you start off with this?
So a couple months ago, we went through a similar messaging exercise where we wanted to come up with what does our paragraph look like? What's our two-liner? What's our one-liner? What is our quickest way to explain ourselves in passing? And the reason why we did that was because we were saying different things. And while we were touching on similar points, there was not a unified message that was going out. And I do think it's really important, even if it can be a little bit of a grind to get everyone on the same page, because you don't want to create any confusion, especially if you are the one controlling the message.
Mm-hmm. So you guys, you recently went through this and you led that refresh, right, Natalie?
Yes.
Did you have some roadblocks or any contention amongst all the folks there?
I think that the key to getting everyone on the same page is to make sure that everyone has the ability and opportunity to voice what is really important for them and what the priorities are. So taking group feedback and saying, what length do we need? What keywords do you want in there? And making everyone's voice feel heard is a good way to make sure everyone's aligned at the end. Because if you have feedback from the very beginning, then the end product will be informed by those people. So it can be hard to, be told we need to develop messaging, but really involving the people in that program and in that initiative is really key to getting it pushed through to the finish line.
Marlena, what would you add here?
I love this question because I really feel like getting that buy-in is something that we can all relate to in communications. I feel like it's something that is a forever challenge, the gold ring we're always reaching for. But what I like to liken it to help people kind of understand and think of it in a term they can understand is to think of it like almost like a security system for your company in the sense that it protects your brand. Having this messaging in place is something that ensures you're putting your best foot forward. And if something goes sideways, you hopefully have a plan in place, much like a security policy to guard it. So once you kind of, I think, break it down and think of it in terms of, this is an investment in an asset that we have to protect, which is our brand reputation, I think it will resonate, hopefully, and get that buy-in that we all so desperately need. But beyond that, I also like to appeal to the competitive side. I feel like everybody who's in business is really in it, obviously, to beat the competition and earn that business at the end of the day. And this is something that all the Fortune 500 companies have invested in. That's not a coincidence. Beyond that, it's something that their competitors probably are doing. So to stay competitive in the marketplace, it's something worth investing in. And if they're not, that's almost even better because then it gives them that advantage.
Yeah, I'll just add one further thing. I totally agree with that, Marlena, just as a standpoint for staying competitive and getting that win and beating out the other folks when you're all clear and on the same page. But also to the person who wrote in about this on just like, there versus coming up with things on the fly for different channels, opportunities. You could totally have that difference that is different, perhaps with a tweak on LinkedIn versus Instagram versus on your narrative in a deck or something like that. But it's still the same at the end of the day. You have a same page or two to look at and go back to. So I would just mention that as another caveat to this, is that, yeah, it can be different, client, on your various pages, because those are different platforms, of course, but we all have to be coming from the same page of what we come up with collectively and agree to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great point, Beck, too, because, messaging by channel definitely varies, but it should definitely feel unified no matter where you are. So how you talk in a newsletter or how you talk on LinkedIn is probably different than how you talk on Instagram, and it should be, because people go to those different channels for different things. So I think thinking through, okay, we have this messaging, we have our key points here, but we have to adapt that to our audience based on where we're posting it.
Quite true. I'm glad you mentioned newsletters, Natalie, because the next question is about newsletters. Here we go. So, dear Banff, pretty much every client I have sends newsletters, but I'm struggling right now on counseling them on what is too often or too self-serving, particularly in the midst of COVID-19. Where do you draw the line on just pausing a newsletter if what you have to say is just irrelevant or tone deaf even? Ooh, Marlena, you want to start?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I personally feel like you can do a lot of damage right now. So it's a high stakes game, and we've touched on this before in our previous webinars, but it's worth repeating here. I definitely think it's worth drawing a line when you're becoming too salesy right now. If you're seen as trying to capitalize on this crisis in any way, I think that can do lasting damage and truly leave a bad taste in people's mouth. So I don't think the juice ain't worth the squeeze, as they say. As far as frequency, I don't worry so much about frequency during a time like this, just because people are so hungry for information during a crisis. I think more in terms of quality and value add for the audience, and really making sure, again, that they're not being too opportunistic in a negative way.
Miss Natalie, you're on deck. I agree, Marlena. High stakes game.
I think agree with everything Marlena said. It's really tone here, how a brand approaches any interaction with customers is really important, but especially now, because there are companies that will either be negatively impacted or hugely benefit from this. So you have to watch both sides of the table, because you can't play both. You have to understand what your customer needs right now and try to be a resource for that. So some ways that you can do that through newsletters. You can offer information or expertise. You can offer resources and services, maybe that are free or discounted. You can offer, partnerships or ways to work together. So I think, brands need to be helpful and need to be resourceful. They need to be empathetic. And if you're reading a newsletter and it feels weird writing it, if you have a pit in your stomach feeling like, I just don't know if this is right, if this is not something I would want to be on the receiving end for, then it's probably not good to send. You really have to listen to your instincts on that. And in terms of frequency, like, how frequently can you put together really meaningful, good quality content? Because, transitioning from a daily newsletter to a twice a week newsletter is an effort of making sure that every single newsletter has good information, because otherwise people are going to leave and say, this isn't worth me opening. So I think a lot of this is guided by instinct, but there are also some really basic brand guidelines, like, are you empathetic? Are you acknowledging the situation? Are you being helpful, being a resource to your customer? Because, at the end of the day, this is the best opportunity to build community and offer something back to community and not make it about you.
Absolutely. Just to echo that, I think brands should really think of this more as a time period in which they're deepening their relationship with their target audiences, not necessarily trying to hit sales targets or worry too much about metrics. This is really about connection and letting your audience know that you understand they're living through a life-altering crisis and are here to partner with them strategically and to provide whatever value you can in this moment. And as Natalie said, to just really let that empathy come through. That's really what I think people will remember when the dust settles and life returns to whatever our new normal is going to be. And I believe that will happen, hopefully sooner than later. And they'll remember that. Just like you can leave, a lingering bad taste in your audience mouth, you can also build brand loyalty pretty profoundly right now if you do it right.
Yeah, no, I would just say that, I know examples of companies, funds that have paused newsletters altogether because it wasn't necessarily a strategic move. So, you could do any variation in terms of what you think is to be most valuable to your community and to your customers, but maybe in some cases that's nothing at all. And that's definitely an option to consider.
Yeah, I kind of wonder on that of like going the whole silent road or path. But at the same time, offering something of quality and benefit. And how do you get around that? Natalie, follow-up question for you, just because I know what's going on in your space, just that you used to write a daily email. I read it every day, by the way. I know that when I get that email, Natalie on the East Coast time, that's when she goes to bed or she goes home. So I'm like, Natalie's day is done. So you would send, and it was a great email about like, the company's news, funding rounds, who's hiring. And it was just kind of like a little recap on what's going on across the whole portfolio. So now you've shifted to, at least for now, and when we're talking right now, to twice a week. How did you have to convey that to the team in some way? Did you get the buy-in? Did that make sense? I'm just thinking of people who are like, oh, how do I pivot right now? And how do I get that buy-in?
Yeah, well, I would say that whoever's closest to the newsletter also understands the audience best. And so they'll probably know the days with the most open rate, things get clicked on the most, what people are looking for. So, I would say that decision was based off of what I think we would have to offer that was valuable and that was interesting, and the frequency of that. When we switched our transition and moved over to twice a week, it was March 16th, which was weeks and weeks and weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so, the thought process was, what are we seeing coming out of our portfolio and how do we maximize that great work that was being done? So I just kind of proposed the revamp of how it would look like, acknowledging COVID-19, and everyone was on board just because having understood the audience and what they look for, they trusted me to execute on what this, COVID adapted newsletter would look like.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I hope some people get on your newsletter so they can read it for themselves too, particularly. Okay, next question. Ladies, here we go. Dear Banff, Dove Beauty is doing an incredible campaign right now that features the actual faces of healthcare workers. I've seen this, by the way. It's great. The brand is getting a lot of praise for its perfect tone of showcasing the real faces of people in healthcare and a brand promise of promoting real beauty. Are there other brands you're seeing that are perfectly executing this right balance? Ooh, who else do you think? Natalie, I'll start with you.
So one of the ways that we've been able to, spotlight the work that our portfolio companies have been doing responding to COVID is through the newsletter. So I've been staying on top of the ways that the companies have pivoted. And it's been really interesting because the ones that feel the most authentic are the ones where it's kind of built into their mission and DNA, giving back to begin with. So one of our companies is a sustainable, earth-friendly personal care brand called By Humankind. And they started making hand sanitizers. And that made perfect sense because, they were already in the space, but then also they rolled out a new product and then donated part of the proceeds to a relief fund in New York. So in the case of Dove, that's right in their sweet spot of their mission-driven company, but they also have a unique advantage making and showcasing this product. So it's really, what's in the company's DNA to begin with, and how can they tap into that right now and bring it to a broader community or an audience in a beneficial way.
Yeah, the authenticity is so key here. What would you say, Marlena?
In the same vein, we have a whole host of clients that we have featured on our BAM blog who have found various ways to join the fight against COVID-19. Some ways it's been really obvious. There's a natural nexus point there. One that comes to mind is we work with a drone company that has started printing protective masks for frontline workers because they have access to these 3D printers. So that seemed like a really natural step for them. We have another one, Cut, that produces video content, and it's it's a great series. I highly recommend it. I'll link it on the blog so that you guys listening can watch it. But it's a look at grocery shopping around the world during COVID-19 and what people are doing to stay within the bounds of these new emerging legal limits when grocery shopping, and you'd be surprised how much it varies from one country to the other. So that's a great value add, for people who are looking for content. We've had other clients too who, have found ways to partner with food banks and do things kind of more in that vein. And one that just kind of zooming out here a little bit is that came to mind because I know Dove was one that they gave an example of. So thinking in like national terms, another one that really resonated with me, and I don't know if you guys caught it, was the Guinness St. Patrick's Day ad. I thought it was brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
Did you guys see that? It was so good.
Explain it to the listeners.
Okay.
Explain it to the listeners, just because I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So Guinness, St. Patrick's Day, hello, biggest holiday of the year for them. Obviously, everybody's, social distancing or in some various degree of lockdown. So they're like, what do we do? So they gave this really kind of warm, inspiring commercial that encouraged everyone to keep their heads up and obviously enjoy a beer at home this year. Yeah. But the kind of the clincher that they closed with that really almost brought a little tear to my eye, not going to lie, said, "Don't worry, we'll march again." And I just thought, this isn't necessarily baked into their brand. They're not like, Guinness is not known as being this like philanthropic powerhouse. However, they found a way to give a nod to what was happening and the gravity of the moment and make it heartwarming. And for a beer company to pull that off, I just thought, bravo. I wanted to stand and clap when I saw it because I just thought it was so authentic still in their own way. So there are various ways. And so I think if companies are thinking, well, geez, I have nothing to offer, no value here, I would challenge them to really think about how they can still show authenticity without maybe, doing something obvious. There's still ways to add value. And I think that's what real authenticity is about.
I will add two, again, on the national front, but even though I'm not a particular fan of McDonald's, at least they did this great thank you meal campaign for first responders that of course ties to their Happy Meals, but it's a thank you meal, has like a thank you note in the actual Happy Meal box, which is like, okay, like, that's obviously an iconic product for that brand. We all know a Happy Meal, but now it's for people that are on the front line. So thought they did a good job with that campaign. And then another one I found, which I just like love, like this is high marks for just creativity, if you ask me. So there's a queso company, like a cheese company. It's called Moe's Southwest Grill.
Oh yeah.
And so did you see this? They filmed 8 hours of a queso meditation. So you can like zone out on looking at cheese dipping.
Oh my God.
Way to use your product in a mental health application. Like awesome.
That it should win an award for Pivot.
I think so too. I think so too. That was like, and that's not, we didn't donate, 1,000 jars to healthcare where it's like, no. They're just like, hey, wait a second. This is meditative.
Yeah. And people,
awesome.
need calming. And if queso does the trick, then I'm all for it.
There you go. High marks on that, and easy to produce too. By the way,
absolutely,
love that,
and gets people talking.
Yes. Oh, all right. Next one here, Dear Banff. I have a client that is rapidly growing organically, which is great. They want to start sending newsletters out. Another newsletter question for you, Natalie. But the CMO doesn't want to until they have, quote, at least 30,000 people, unquote, in their database to do this. Thoughts on how to build a newsletter organically. The CMO threw out that she would be willing to buy emails, but I've said that's certainly not advised. Marlena, I think, are you first?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So definitely agree. No buying emails. I would advise against that as well. There's some other great ways to organically engage your audience. We've had a lot of success here lately with our webinars. I think that is a wonderful value add, especially right now, if you have some sort of information or other engagement you can offer to your audience. 30-minute webinar. People are home, obviously, working more from home, spending all their time indoors. So why not give them a great webinar and capture their attention through that means? I also think that, in the vein of being online more, being at home more, we're seeing more reach on social media. So being more active there. This is a great time to experiment and kind of see what works, because audience behaviors are changing right now. The whole way we consume content right now is in flux, and will be probably for a while. So I think this is a great time to kind of put some new irons in the fire, so to speak. But those are kind of some ways right off the top of my head that I think would be a better, probably more valuable way than just simply, buying mail that people will probably put in their spam folder anyways.
I don't even get that, because who even sees your email count? Like, no one. It's not like your fake Twitter followers. So I've never understood that. Like, is that just for your ego to say at the board meeting, like, well, we have 50,000 email? I don't understand that. Anyway, Natalie.
Yeah. So, I think, growing organically takes more time, but you also have a way more engaged and authentic audience. There are ways to push people to a newsletter now that I think are unique to the current situation. I'm just like inundated with news stories to read. I've, dozens of tabs open at any given time. So if you can serve as a way to consolidate and collate information for your audience, it's a great time to start a newsletter. If you have a sweet spot or you have a particular focus where there's, a COVID angle, or there's a way to be helpful and building that organically, there are a number of newsletters that have launched in the last couple of weeks with that focus. One of my favorites is BuzzFeed has a Quarantine Times newsletter.
Yes, it's a good one.
Which is so fun. And it has anything from recipes to DIY activities. And, they launched it within the last couple of weeks. And maybe they put spend behind it, but I heard about it through the grapevine. So I think when it comes to growing organically and adding subscribers, it does take a while to get that really engaged audience. But the better of a job you do and more thoughtful you are, the more likely people are to refer others to it, making it really easy to forward to other people. Word of mouth is super relevant when it comes to newsletters. But I do think reader habits right now, people want a rundown of things. What did I miss? What are helpful things to help me get through, today and the next couple weeks and months? So, I think that it's that a part of it is that word of mouth, but then also making it really easy to subscribe to. Are you sharing it on social? When I go to the website, do I get a pop-up saying subscribe to my newsletter? Put it in your email signature too, subscribe to our newsletter. Just, all the touch points that you might have with a potential reader, put it there.
The other thing too, that pop-up is great, because a lot of times folks are not going all over your website going, oh, where's that little box where I could sign up? Let me go. No, they're not. So put it up front. The other thing too is put it in your signature and make sure everyone on the team has it too.
Yep.
So easy. It's just right there. People like scan the bottom of the email. It's like, oh, perfect. So I've seen that be effective for folks. But long story short, listener, do not buy the emails.
No, because if your first introduction is like, how did you get in my inbox? It's like elbowing your way on the subway. It is. And it feels gross. Doesn't feel good.
No.
Agreed. Okay, here's our last question for today, ladies. Dear BAMP, I have so many tech product clients, and one in particular wants to always include a discount in every newsletter. I think this cheapens the brand. It is more of a luxury item, but my client is getting antsy about moving product amid COVID. What can I say? Thoughts on this? Natalie, you're first.
Okay. So there are different ways that you can move product without discounting. People are discounting a lot right now because in some cases they have way more inventory than they're used to and they want to move it. So you can discount. You could also do a giveaway. You could do, at that point, try to get more newsletter subscribers saying, if you use this link, forward to X many people, and then you'll get this product at a discount. You'll get a discount code. So you could actually make it more beneficial to you than just selling. Do you need more email capture? Can you forward things to friends? Can you do, any partnerships from that? I do think it's hard because if people see a discount in every newsletter, I do this with, the companies I buy clothes from. Okay, it's 15%. Is it going to be 20% tomorrow?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You lose a little bit of authority over the purchasing timeline for a customer. So definitely spicing it up, trying to do things that'll move products without saying we're offering discounts, because people are only going to look for the lowest numbers. At least I do.
Mm-hmm. Well, because you get conditioned to that. And you're like, okay, wait a second. I wait another 2 days and it's now 60% off.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just, Marlena, what would you say?
I think those are all great ideas. I think the only thing I might add too is that, we've seen a few clients who have, again, done partnerships with nonprofits related to COVID to say, for every purchase, we'll donate a certain percentage to this local food bank. So that could be a nice way to try and push those sales up without being too pushy. And I think also, just remembering too that if you're pushing out too many discount, buy messages right now, a lot of people are hurting financially. Some are might be out of a job. And so again, just being cognizant of where your audience is, that could really damage your brand, rather than, just to echo what we touched on earlier, deepening the relationship and building that brand loyalty, so that when things do recalibrate and we're back up and running, in a more normal capacity, people remember that. And then the sales hopefully will correct themselves in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now is the time to build, as we talked about, community and some of that brand equity, not, oh my God, everything's on sale. Don't you want to buy it?
Yeah. Blow out. Shop.
Yeah. Unless you're having a full close down here. But we can't really tell from the question. He said, she said, one in particular ways include a discount every newsletter. It's a luxury item, so we don't really know what's going on in the full context there.
Right.
But goes back to what we earlier talked about, which now is not the time to be just pushing product all over the place and having a tone deaf
strategy, right?
Tone in general, thinking like, oh, everyone's just buying everything, all systems go. That's just not the environment we're in. So
right.
There's some tone elements to that as well, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, ladies, for covering all these questions today.
Yeah,
it was a good batch.
This was great.
Yeah, and
was great.
Worth stating the obvious. This is a great way for us to add value, guys, right in the middle of a pandemic. So we are walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
There you go. Good point, Marlena. I appreciate that. Exactly.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Dear Banff, the advice podcast for PR and marketing pros like you. Our show was created by BAM, a PR and marketing agency headquartered in San Diego and New York City. The music you're enjoying today was composed by Tiffany Dizon, produced by Daniel Kessner, and played by San Diego Symphony's Art of Alon. Thank you to our podcast production team at Citizen Recording. If you have a tough PR and marketing question you'd like us to answer, write to us at bamcommunications.biz/DearBanff. Don't forget the F. We'll be back next Monday with another episode of Dear Banff. Until then,